If you're like me, you love chocolate and you love tinkering in the kitchen. In today's episode, the very first episode of Craft Chocolate Test Kitchen, we're going to be doing a dark milk chocolate and explain how we're doing it, what the recipe is, and why exactly it's both dark and milk. As I said in the intro, welcome to the very first episode of Craft Chocolate Test Kitchen. I'm Jesse Funk, a lover of this hobby, and hopefully together we can explore chocolate, new ways to make it, experiment with things, and hopefully find ways to make new delicious chocolate that we can each enjoy. Today's recipe comes from John Nanci, or at least this is the first person I've seen introduce this. John Nanci from Chocolate Alchemy, who I would consider almost the grandfather of craft chocolate at home. He's been doing it forever, so check him out, chocolatealchemy.com. He also has a YouTube channel here, I'll link to down in the description. Now, John's recipe, or what he suggests starting out with for milk chocolate, is an evenly split 25-25-25-25 recipe. Now, what I mean is we're going to be doing 25% cocoa nibs, 25% cocoa butter, 25% sugar, and 25% milk powder. Now, this kind of explains why it is both a dark chocolate and a milk chocolate. So anything that's dark is 50% cocoa content or higher, and anything with milk chocolate has milk powder. So that's exactly why it is dark and milk at the same time. Now, this is not a recipe that I've made before, so you're going to be experimenting along with me and with this particular bean. So what I've chosen, this origin comes from Colombia. From the beans that I've tried out, this has a very nice deep chocolatey taste to it, with some sweeter notes in it. It's described as having a whiskey, caramel, molasses, those kind of things in it. At least when I roasted it the very first time, I didn't really get all of that, but given that I'm relatively new to the hobby, it's probably me as well as the problem. So we're going to roast this bean, crack it, winnow it, all that kind of stuff, and then we're going to get it in the melanger. I'll show you how we load the melanger during this video. If you want to see how to barrel roast at home with this fine fellow back here behind me, I'm going to do that in another video, so hit subscribe. You can check that out when that comes out, or if it's already out, I'll link to it at the end of this video, but subscribe so you stick around. So let's get into the roasting, cracking, winnowing, and then I'll be back when we're ready to put everything inside the melanger. So we roast, cracked, winnowed, and now we've got our nibs. So now it's time to weigh out everything, equal proportions again, 25, 25, 25, 25 across bag. Whole milk powder, nibs, sugar, cocoa butter. I melt cocoa butter in the microwave. You can use the microwave, you can use a double boiler. Some people I've experimented with using a heat gun. Any method goes fine. Then we're going to load it in the melanger. I'll do an overhead shot as we load in. I like to load in the nibs with the spring just barely going so that the wheels have a little bit of space underneath. I kind of like pre-grind in some aspects that way instead of like pre-grinding in a food processor. Once that's been processed a little bit, then I will allow the spring to be tightened more so that we can actually get a full grind of the nibs. After cocoa butter and the nibs are added, then we go ahead and add the milk powder and the sugar, and then I'll see you, what'll it be? I guess it'll be tomorrow. Sometime between 18 and 24 hours is typically what works for my process here. And then it'll be time for molding. Okay, so we have actually finally gotten to the point where we've made our chocolate, but now it's in a place where we can't quite pour it into the molds. We actually need to temper it. Now, we're not going to go over all the ways to temper in this video. We can do that in another video. We're going to be using cocoa butter silk, which is, to me, the most reliable way to actually temper craft chocolate because it's not pre-tempered. So this is basically a method of seeding the chocolate because chocolate's made up of different crystals and we want a particular kind of crystal. It's a type 5 crystal to get the kind of snap and stability we want out of the bar. So you'll see me do that here in a minute. If you want to learn how to make cocoa butter silk or how to get it, subscribe, stick around. We'll do that in a future video. But let's pour the molds, get the chocolate out, and then we'll talk about how it tastes. So here a bit later, we've got our chocolate out of our molds. One thing you'll notice with these, you can see, and I'll put a picture up on the screen, you can see there's like little speckles. I've experienced this with my milk chocolate. I really haven't experienced this with my dark chocolate. And it's basically, we'll call it surface bloom. Like the temper is good, and you can tell that like if you back up on the screen to that shot where I'm unmolding the chocolates are basically pulled away from the mold almost completely, which is how you know that you've tempered properly. But these little speckles, my suspicion is I'm moving the molds too much to get the chocolate all into place. So that's something that I'm going to need to experiment with to try to get these more to what I would consider like a commercial quality finish. Taste, texture, all that stuff isn't really affected, but you do have the blemishes of those on here, and you kind of get them. They go away a little bit if you rub, but just like you don't want to have to rub all of your bars of chocolate. You want them to come out nice to begin with. So that's something I work on with milk chocolate. My dark chocolate bars don't come out that way, but it has a good snap to it. We'll see if I can snap this close to the microphone so you can hear this. Good snap, and then we're comparing it to. So this is a 60% dark I did. This is a big chunk I have saved. And I don't know if you can see this. Maybe I'll do like a close-up shot of that. This is a chunk I've saved, the 60% dark that I'm going to be making a dark chocolate single origin tart with. If you want to see how that's made, again, subscribe. Let me know in the comments below that you'd like to see how that's made. I really like to make things with the chocolate that still show off the single origin chocolate. But back to our milk chocolate bar, our dark milk chocolate here. Let's check out how it tastes. One thing I was really surprised by this bar, because I'm tasting it as it's in the melanger at various stages. You know, all those different textures we went through. I'm kind of tasting it and seeing like, how's it developing? How's it taste in different textures? In part so I can be familiar with those processes on a subjective level. But one of the things I didn't expect was to actually get much sweetness, because when it was in the melanger, before it got to the really like smooth finish stage, which actually only took about a little over 12 hours for this batch, it really didn't come off with sweetness at all. But then that is in part from heat. So when things are warmer, you're not going to taste the sugar as much. So especially when we have little sugar or less sugar in this particular recipe than we do, and maybe like the 60% is 40% sugar. When you have less sugar in, you're not going to taste it as much. It's more subtle, especially when you go up in temperature or down. So like I make ice cream as well, and when you're cooking that, you don't taste it. When it's real cold, you don't taste it as much either. It's like right in the middle around room temperature that you taste the sugar more. So I was surprised with the dark milk here in getting a little more sweetness than I thought. It's not real sweet. It's definitely very creamy, but I do miss probably, some of the notes that we would get in like the 60% or if we did a 70% bar of this Colombian bean. It isn't bad. This is honestly the first dark milk I've ever had, so I have nothing to compare it to as of yet. There really aren't a ton of good places around us to get artisan chocolate. There's a few, but they tend to carry the more like 70%, 80%, that kind of stuff instead of like the dark milks. I think personally where I would go from here is take like John Nanci recipe where we're at the 25, 25, 25, 25. I would actually up my sugar a little bit and up my cocoa nibs. So I would probably go 30% cocoa nibs, 20% milk powder, 30% sugar, 20% cocoa butter. That should still work out to have enough cocoa butter to produce a solid couverture style chocolate. It should have plenty of snap, good melt, all that kind of stuff. But I would like to taste a little bit more of the bean. It isn't muted like an actual milk chocolate would be, where it's just like, oh, that's nice. Like it's sweet, it's creamy. You definitely still get the bean, but because we're doing craft chocolate and we really want the bean to shine no matter what we're doing, especially when it's like simple like this, that's where I think I would go next, is go up the nibs a little bit, turn down the creaminess, because I think you're going to get plenty even at 20%, and then up the sugar, because if you don't know, sugar is what helps us kind of detect some of those more like subtle flavors inside of the cocoa nibs, which is why, if you just taste like 100% cocoa mass bar, it doesn't taste anything like a 60, 70, 80% bar, because that sugar helps us kind of detect those little tastes and aromas and all those kind of things that are inside of those single origin bars that we wouldn't necessarily be able to get otherwise. So that's kind of my thoughts where I would go on this one. As mentioned earlier in the video, if you want to see that episode on barrel roasting, which I put my barrel roaster away because this is another day, we've cleaned up the kitchen since then, stick around. That's going to be coming out next. If it's already out, it'll be linked to on the channel, but obviously subscribe so you can get more videos, because I've got lots more planned for us to try out to figure out how to make better chocolate in the future. So hopefully I'll see you on the next episode of Craft Chocolate Test Kitchen.